There's a quiet war inside you that no one sees. You smile with warmth, you listen without judgment, and you offer pieces of your soul as if they were infinite. But in the dark, behind closed doors and sleepless nights, you're asking yourself the question you're too ashamed to say out loud. Why do I keep attracting people who hurt me? They don't show up as villains. They show up as charm. They show up as intensity. They show up with stories of pain and longing, and something in you immediately rises. I understand them. But is that understanding or recognition? You think it's your empathy that draws them, but it's not just empathy. It's history. Unhealed history. You're not being punished. You're being shown. Again and again. Until you finally look in the mirror, not at them, but at the part of you that keeps opening the door. Not because you're weak, but because you've been trained to think love requires sacrifice. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." So let me ask you now, what darkness are you still pretending not to see? The one who gives too much, the one who never says no, the one who's terrified of being alone. That's not just kindness, that's a mask, a persona, as Jung would call it. The false self you constructed to survive in a world that taught you early on, if I'm good enough, quiet enough, giving enough, I'll be safe. And so you became everything to everyone except to yourself. The shadow of the empath is not cruelty. It is self-abandonment, dressed as compassion, and narcissists, consciously or not, smell it. They feel the subtle vibration of someone willing to dim their light just to feel loved. They aren't drawn to your strength, they're drawn to the hole you don't know is still bleeding. It begins innocently. They flatter you, mirror you, offer intense validation in the beginning because they've already sensed you're craving what you rarely give yourself: significance. You've mistaken being seen for being chosen, but the truth is, they're only seeing the reflection of themselves in your gaze. And you're falling in love not with them, but with the idea that you are finally needed, that your softness is finally welcome. But it's not welcome, it's being consumed. Narcissists do not want your love. They want your energy, your attention, your devotion. They want the high of being worshipped, and you mistake it for intimacy. But Jung warned us what remains unconscious will rule your life, and you will call it fate. You think these encounters are just bad luck. They're not. They're a pattern. One that began the moment you first felt love was something to earn, something conditional, something tied to how useful you were. You became emotionally fluent, not by choice, but by necessity. You learned how to read rooms, to manage moods, to keep the peace. Maybe one of your parents was volatile, or emotionally absent, or loving only when you were performing, so you adapted. You became a sponge, a mirror. You developed a supernatural ability to sense what others need and give it before they ask. But no one taught you how to ask for yourself. Your boundaries were never modeled. Your needs were never prioritized. And your instincts to run, to say no, to speak up, were buried under guilt and survival. So now, when someone demands too much, when someone crosses the line, when someone makes you question your worth, you don't flee. You try harder, you overfunction, you explain yourself, you shrink, because your nervous system doesn't register the narcissist as danger. It registers them as familiar. But here's the truth. Just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's safe. Just because you're good at surviving chaos doesn't mean you belong in it. Your empathy is not supposed to be a trap. It is supposed to be your gift. But gifts without boundaries become bait. Narcissists don't take advantage of your kindness. They take advantage of your disconnection from yourself. They feed on the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. And the more disconnected you are from your own needs, your own voice, your own rage, the more space they have to enter. That's the hidden empath trap. You don't just attract narcissists because of your light. You attract them because you haven't yet fully claimed your shadow. And what is the shadow of the empath? It's not the desire to harm. It's the refusal to receive. It's the guilt you feel when you choose yourself. It's the story that says being alone means being unworthy. It's the part of you that confuses loyalty with self-betrayal. That's what must be faced, not the narcissist, but the version of you who still believes they deserve to be fixed. This is where the work begins. Not in cutting people off, but in calling yourself back. Piece by piece, moment by moment. Every time you say, "This hurts," and choose not to stay. Every time you feel guilt and don't let it control you. Every time you say no without explaining. Every time you put yourself first and let the discomfort rise, because on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. Jung taught that the self is not found, it is built. And you build it not through others, but through confrontation with the deepest parts of yourself. When you meet the part of you that wants to please, ask, why? When you meet the part that can't let go, ask what it's afraid to lose. When you meet the part that keeps giving to people who only take, ask who you're really trying to save. Often it's not them. It's your younger self, the one who wasn't seen, wasn't chosen, wasn't protected. And if you don't heal that wound, you will keep offering your heart to those who echo your earliest heartbreaks. This isn't about blame. This is about awakening. You did what you had to do to survive. But now you're being asked to live. To stop abandoning yourself in the name of compassion. To stop silencing your truth just to be loved. To stop confusing intensity for connection. You are not here to fix others at the cost of yourself. You are here to become whole. And wholeness requires that you stop betraying yourself just to be chosen. The only person who needs to choose you now is you. There's a moment in every empath's life that changes everything, not because the world suddenly becomes kinder, but because something finally breaks inside. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's subtle, almost invisible. It's the moment you stop trying, the moment you stop bending, the moment the ache of being unseen becomes greater than the fear of being alone. That moment, though quiet, is sacred. Because it's not collapse, it's awakening. It's the moment the persona begins to crack. The persona Jung described as the mask we wear to face the world. But beneath that mask, there is something ancient, something aching to be whole. Something that no longer wants to pretend that being needed is the same as being loved. You've given everything, again and again. You've explained your heart. You've apologized for your standards. You've walked on eggshells in rooms you were feeding. You've watched people you adored twist your softness into weakness. And still a part of you asks, maybe I was too much, or worse, maybe I wasn't enough. But what if the problem was never you? What if the truth is that narcissists are not drawn to you because of your light, but because they know you don't fully believe you deserve to keep it? That's the wound they sense. That's the part of you still waiting for external validation to feel internally safe. That's why the cycle doesn't break with distance. It breaks with self-confrontation. You see, narcissists thrive in imbalance. They seek control. Not always consciously, but compulsively. And what gives them that control? Your guilt, your over-explaining, your inability to tolerate disapproval, your need to be understood. That is the invisible currency of the empath-narcissist bond. You give in hopes of being chosen. They take in hopes of never having to choose anyone but themselves. And so the dance continues until you stop dancing, until you no longer use your empathy as a shield. Until you let the parts of you that you've hidden, the anger, the pride, the desire, take their rightful place at the table of your identity. We like to think of empathy as the ultimate virtue. But Jung would caution us, anything that exists only in light without its shadow is incomplete. True empathy includes boundaries. It includes saying no. It includes walking away without guilt. It includes the ability to feel someone's pain without absorbing it. It is not martyrdom. It is not spiritual codependency. It is not a lifestyle of overfunctioning so others can underfunction. And yet so many empaths live in burnout, in depletion, in constant anxiety. Not because they care too much, but because they were never taught how to care for themselves with the same intensity. You cannot keep giving love to people who do not recognize the value of what you're offering. Not because they're evil, but because they are operating from their own wounds, the ones that taught them that control is safety, that manipulation is power, that vulnerability is weakness. A narcissist doesn't just want love. They want supply. And if your identity is built around giving without receiving, you become a perfect source. But only if you stay asleep. Only if you continue to believe that your worth is proven through your ability to endure. But what if your ability to walk away is the real proof of your healing? What if saying no more is the most loving thing you'll ever do, not just for yourself, but for the part of you that never had a voice? There's a phrase Jung used that haunts those on the path of awakening. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that privilege demands pain. It demands rupture. It demands the death of false identity. You have to become the one who no longer needs to be needed. The one who can sit with their own loneliness without reaching for chaos. The one who no longer sacrifices peace for the illusion of connection. And that kind of person, that kind of empath is no longer a match for narcissists. But don't be mistaken, this path is not easy. It is a funeral for your old self. A self who found safety in pleasing. Who found identity in emotional labor. Who believed love meant staying silent. That self doesn't die peacefully. It fights, it clings, it bargains. It tells you, just one more chance. It whispers, they didn't mean it. It romanticizes the highs and forgets the cost. But if you want to be free, you must mourn that version of you. Not with shame, but with reverence. Because that self kept you alive. That self protected you. But now you are ready for more than survival. You are ready to live without needing to be rescued. To feel your feelings without making them someone else's responsibility. To set a boundary without second-guessing. To trust that what you feel matters, even if no one else understands it. To hold space for others without abandoning yourself. That is what Jung meant by integration, not becoming perfect, but becoming whole. And wholeness means you are no longer at war with your shadow. You have befriended it. You have learned that your anger is sacred. Your boundaries are holy. Your needs are not burdens. And your empathy is a gift, not a transaction. So the next time someone enters your life and feels like home, pause. Ask yourself, is this person triggering your trauma or awakening your truth? Are they mirroring your worth or echoing your wound? And if it's the latter, walk away. Not because you hate them, but because you love yourself enough to choose peace over patterns. That is the moment your healing begins. That is the moment the narcissist loses their power. Not because they changed, but because you did. There comes a time when you look at your own reflection and realize that the version of yourself you've been performing is exhausted. You've spent years keeping the peace even when you were breaking. Years holding space for others even when no one was holding space for you. You've convinced yourself that if you could just love more, fix more, give more, they would finally change. But here you are, alone again, wondering why people who claim to love you also seem to hurt you the most. And yet somewhere deep within, something whispers, you already know. You know it's not about how much you give. It's about what you believe you're allowed to receive. Carl Jung warned that we attract not what we want, but what we are. Not who we are consciously, but what we carry in our unconscious. So ask yourself, what unhealed truth do you carry? What buried belief still tells you that your value is conditional, that love must be earned, that your needs are too much? Because narcissists are not drawn to your light alone. They're drawn to the shadow that light is hiding. The shadow that says, if I am useful, I am safe. The shadow that says, if I am forgiving, I will be loved. The shadow that says, if I suffer silently, they'll see how much I care. These are not conscious thoughts. They are psychological blueprints, and until you rewrite them, you will continue to call them destiny. But there's something deeper still, something more painful, something you don't want to admit, that the chaos feels familiar, that the emotional roller coaster feels like home. Not because it's right, but because it's what your nervous system memorized as love. If you grew up in a house where love was inconsistent, where presence was earned, where emotions were unpredictable, then emotional intensity becomes your baseline. Peace feels foreign. Stillness feels boring. Calm feels like disconnection. So when someone gives you steady, honest, grounded love, it doesn't excite you. But when someone hot and cold enters your world, you call it chemistry. But it's not chemistry, it's trauma bonding. And until you see that clearly, you will mistake your triggers for your soulmates. This is the hidden architecture of why empaths attract narcissists. The empath's wound is abandonment. The narcissist's wound is shame. The empath fears being forgotten, so they overextend. The narcissist fears being exposed, so they overinflate. And together they perform the unconscious theater of unfinished childhood. The empath becomes the emotional caretaker. The narcissist becomes the black hole of validation, and both get stuck. The empath feels used, the narcissist feels unsatisfied, and neither understands why. But Jung would say, this is not love, this is shadow play. And no matter how spiritual, how evolved, how kind you think you are, if you're still acting from unconscious wounds, the pattern will repeat. But here's the revelation. You can step out of the pattern, not by fixing them, but by facing you, by turning inward, by finally confronting the part of you that doesn't believe they deserve reciprocity, the part of you that sees red flags and paints them white, the part of you that calls being drained devotion. You must go to the root, not the recent heartbreak, but the first one, the one where you learned that being loved means being useful. The one where you made your worth dependent on someone else's attention. That is the child you must now protect. That is the moment you must now rewrite. Because no amount of saving others will save her. You must become the adult who finally says, you are enough right now without giving anything. That's the paradox. The more you heal, the less you tolerate what you once settled for. The more you love yourself, the less appeal narcissists have. Not because they disappear, but because they no longer match your frequency. They speak the language of lack, of performance, of illusion. And you now grounded in your truth, no longer respond. Your silence becomes your power. Your absence becomes your boundary. You stop explaining, you stop fixing, you stop proving, because the moment you no longer need their validation is the moment you break the spell. But don't expect them to leave quietly. When you stop playing your role, their mask will slip. They may guilt you, blame you, paint you as the villain. Why? Because your growth threatens their control. You were their mirror, their source, their supply, and now you've stepped out of the script. Narcissists don't mourn the relationship, they mourn the loss of your obedience. And when you stop giving it, they will try to pull you back in. With nostalgia, with rage, with promises, with silence. But you've seen the cycle, you've lived the highs and the crashes, and this time you choose differently. Not because you're angry, but because you are finally awake. Healing is not pretty, it's brutal. It means facing the parts of you that kept choosing pain just to feel something. It means mourning the fantasy, the potential, the what could have been. It means sitting in the emptiness that follows detachment and letting it teach you that emptiness is not the enemy. It is the space in which your true self returns. The self that was buried beneath roles, expectations, personas. That self does not need to be needed. That self does not perform to be seen. That self is whole. And when you meet that self, narcissists become irrelevant. Not because they've changed, but because you have. So, if you're listening to this with tears in your eyes, wondering why it hurts so much to let go, remember this. You are not letting go of love. You are letting go of illusion. You are not losing your heart. You are finding your soul. And the ache you feel is not weakness, it's rebirth. You are shedding layers of who you were taught to be and stepping into who you truly are. And yes, that process will leave you raw, but it will also make you real. And the real you doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't break themselves to belong. The real you doesn't attract narcissists. The real you doesn't confuse chaos with love. The real you chooses peace over potential. And for the first time in your life, the real you chooses you. There's something no one tells you about healing. It's lonely. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being without people, but the kind that comes from no longer being who you were and not yet knowing who you're becoming. It's the in-between, the space after you've walked away from patterns, but before new alignments have found you. You no longer respond to toxicity, but you also haven't learned how to fully receive peace. And in that silence, the old self screams, the self who was needed, who was praised for self-sacrifice, who felt worthy because someone else was broken enough to need fixing. That version of you doesn't go quietly. It pulls at you. It whispers, "This is who we are. This is how we survive." But it's not who you are. It's who you had to become to feel safe. And now it's time to release them. Carl Jung taught that the individuation process, the journey to becoming your whole self, requires descent into the unconscious, into the places you've avoided, into the narratives you've outgrown. And the descent is not symbolic, it's real. It shows up as breakdowns, as emotional exhaustion, as the crumbling of every identity you once used to protect yourself. You may lose relationships. You may lose your desire to perform. You may lose your tolerance for anything inauthentic. And in that loss, you gain clarity. Because who you are beneath the performance is someone who no longer seeks validation through dysfunction. But to reach that depth, you must be willing to sit in discomfort. The discomfort of not fixing, of not chasing, of not rescuing. You must resist the urge to soothe your anxiety with emotional labor. You must unlearn the reflex of overgiving. That's not just behavior, it's addiction. An addiction to being needed, an addiction to purpose through pain. And like any addiction, withdrawal is real. You will feel empty, you will question your worth, you will doubt your instincts, but the only way out is through the silence, through the loneliness, through the urge to go back to what's familiar. Because only then do you begin to hear something deeper, your own voice, not the voice of your trauma, not the voice of your fear, but the voice of yourself. The one who remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. The one who values your presence even when no one else is watching. The one who says, you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to perform worth. That voice is soft at first, almost imperceptible, because it's been drowned out for so long by the noise of other people's needs, expectations, and demands. But the more you listen, the louder it becomes. And eventually, it becomes your compass. That's the turning point. When you no longer define yourself by how others treat you. When someone's inability to love you no longer translates as your unworthiness. When you can witness manipulation and choose to disengage not with bitterness, but with sovereignty. That is what power looks like in an empath. Not controlling, not fixing, but discerning. Choosing where your energy goes. Choosing what environments you enter. Choosing who gets access to your inner world. And doing so without guilt. Because guilt is not an indication of wrongness. Sometimes it's the echo of old conditioning being broken. The empath who becomes conscious is a force. Because they are no longer operating from lack. They're no longer seeking their missing pieces in others. They no longer need to be needed to feel important. Instead, they become whole. And from that wholeness, they offer love that is not transactional. They give without losing. They listen without absorbing. They care without collapsing. And most of all, they protect their peace like a sacred altar. Because now, they know peace is not the absence of love. It's the proof of it. But here's the most sacred truth. The people who cannot love you without controlling you will call your healing selfish. They will call your boundaries cruelty. They will call your silence punishment. But don't let those words pull you back. Don't let their projections undo your growth. Remember, they only knew how to relate to the version of you that tolerated mistreatment. The version of you that stayed. The version of you that explained every no with 3 paragraphs of apology. They don't know this new you, this sovereign you, this integrated you. And they don't need to. Because you don't owe your old self a lifetime subscription. You don't owe your past patterns a second chance. And you certainly don't owe your pain a home in your future. What you owe is to the self, to the truth inside you that has waited patiently beneath the ruin. Or people-pleasing. The self that said enough the last time you cried yourself to sleep, wondering what more you could give. The self that kept whispering, "You don't have to break to belong. That's who you serve now. That's who you return to." And from that return, something remarkable happens. Your nervous system recalibrates. What once felt like chemistry now feels like chaos. What once felt exciting now feels unstable. What once lured you in now repels you. Because you've reprogrammed your body to no longer equate suffering with love. You've taught your inner child that she's no longer alone. You've become the guardian of your own spirit. And in that space, in that alignment, you don't attract narcissists anymore. Not because they don't exist, but because you no longer feed what feeds them. That is freedom. Not just in the external, but in the internal. No more fawning, no more fixing, no more dimming, just truth. Just presence, just you unapologetically whole. And in that wholeness, you begin to attract something new, people who respect your no, people who value your emotional labor and don't expect it for free, people who bring peace instead of addiction, love instead of confusion, and maybe most importantly, people who see you not as someone to use, but someone to honor. And now you're here, on the other side of every betrayal you once mistook for love. On the edge of something ancient within you stirring for the first time without shame. You're no longer asking, "Why do they keep doing this to me?" Instead, you're asking, "Why did I stay so long?" That shift is everything, because the moment you stop centering their behavior and start centering your truth, that's the moment you stop being a magnet for people who only love what they can use. It's not your job to diagnose their wounds. It's not your duty to justify their patterns. And it's not your fate to heal what they refuse to face. You've done enough. You've given enough. And the truth is, there's nothing more to prove. Carl Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And now, you're awake. No longer dreaming of potential. No longer fantasizing about who they could become. No longer waiting for the version of them that only exists in your hopes. Because when you look inside and see clearly, you realize you were never in love with the person. You were in love with the story. The story where your love was enough to transform them. The story where if you just stayed soft, stayed loyal, stayed patient, they would finally choose you the way you always needed to be chosen. But they didn't. And maybe they never could. Because they weren't built for depth. They weren't built for reciprocity. They were built for consumption. And you were built for communion. Sacred, mutual, soul-level communion. So now the question isn't, why did they hurt me? It's why did I ignore myself for so long? And the answer is painful because you weren't ignoring yourself out of weakness. You were abandoning yourself out of fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, and more deeply, fear of worthlessness. That if you didn't keep giving, they'd leave. That if you didn't tolerate it, no one else would come. That if you chose peace, you'd have to face the emptiness alone. But what you've learned now is this peace is never empty. It is filled with truth, with clarity, with self-respect, and that silence you feared. It's sacred. Because in it, you finally hear the voice that's been waiting underneath the noise of everyone else's demands. The voice of yourself. The self doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It doesn't need external validation to feel real. It simply knows. It knows when something doesn't feel right. It knows when your energy is being drained. It knows when someone's love comes with chains, and it knows when your empathy is being weaponized against you. The self is what you become when you integrate your shadow, not destroy it. When you honor your fire instead of fearing it. When you understand that being good is not the same as being whole. You were taught that love was something to perform for. But now you know real love doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need exhaustion. It doesn't need self-erasure. It requires only truth. And the truth is this: the longer you abandon your needs, the louder your wounds will scream for attention. They will manifest as relationships that mirror your self-neglect, as narcissists who reflect back the parts of you that feel invisible, as cycles that repeat not to punish, but to awaken. And now that you're awake, you can stop. You can step out of the role. You can put down the emotional labor. You can stop making excuses for their lack of accountability. You can stop shrinking in order to stay. And you can finally face the fear that kept you stuck, not to be paralyzed by it, but to pass through it. Because fear is not a wall, it's a threshold. And once you cross it, you realize you were never meant to live in pieces. So let yourself grieve. Grieve the version of you who didn't know better. Grieve the time you lost trying to earn crumbs from people who feasted on your light. Grieve the illusion that your love could change someone who refuses to meet you. And then after the grief, rise. Rise not in spite of your past, but because of it. You didn't survive all this pain to become bitter. You survived to become whole. You survived to become the version of yourself who no longer performs worth, who no longer hands your heart to those who haven't earned the right to hold it, who no longer explains your no, who no longer fears your own needs, who no longer mistakes trauma bonds for destiny. The narcissist taught you what you will never accept again. And that too is a gift. Because now you recognize the signs, you feel the red flags in your bones, you trust your nervous system when it flinches. You walk away before the damage is done, not because you don't care, but because you care deeply about yourself. And that's what real empathy is. Not the capacity to absorb everyone else's chaos, but the ability to stay grounded in your own truth even when others try to shake it. To be kind without being exploited. To be open without being invaded. To be loving without being lost. So if this echoed something hidden within you, maybe this is your moment to remember. Maybe you didn't find this message by accident. Maybe the part of you that's been whispering for years is finally being heard. The part that said, "You're not broken. You're just tired of playing small. You're just waking up." And if that's true, then this isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a life where you no longer wait to be chosen, because you've chosen yourself again and again and again. Let that be your legacy. Not the love you gave to those who drained you, but the love you reclaimed for yourself, the courage it took to walk away, the silence you endured to rebuild your soul, the fire you allowed to rise from the ashes. That is who you are now. That is the gift your pain has given you. That is the transformation your descent has birthed. You don't attract narcissists anymore. You attract peace. You attract truth. You attract people who see you not because they need something, but because they recognize a soul that has come home. And now, you're home.
Have you ever looked at your life and felt a terrifying sense of déjà vu? I don't mean the feeling that you have been in a room before. I mean the haunting realization that you are living the exact same tragedy for the third, fourth, fifth time, just with different actors. You change your job because your boss was a tyrant, only to find yourself 6 months later working for another tyrant who wears a different suit. You end a relationship because you felt unheard and invisible, swearing you will never settle for less again. Yet here you are, a year later, sitting across from a new stranger, feeling that same cold, familiar ache in your chest. You move cities, you change your appearance, you read self-help books, and you promise yourself that this time will be different. But it never is. The scenery changes, the faces change, but the script remains identical. And slowly a quiet desperation sets in. You start to ask yourself, is this my destiny? Is the universe conspiring against me? Am I cursed? The answer is both simpler and far more disturbing than a curse. You are not unlucky. You are not a victim of random cosmic cruelty. You are stuck in a loop generated by the most powerful invisible force in your existence, your own unconscious mind. You are repeating the pain, because at a deep subterranean level, you have not yet decided to heal it. You are reenacting the crash site, hoping that this time you can pull a survivor from the wreckage. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who ventured deeper into the human shadow than perhaps anyone else, gave us a key to unlock this prison. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Read that again. What you call fate, the bad luck, the toxic partners, the financial failures, is not fate at all. It is a psychological program running in the background, a script written years ago that you are compelled to act out scene by scene until you finally wake up and realize you are the one holding the pen. But waking up is painful. Waking up requires you to admit that the common denominator in all your suffering is you. And that is why most people prefer to sleepwalk through their misery, blaming the world rather than facing the darkness within themselves. To understand why we repeat pain, we must understand the nature of the psyche. The human mind is designed for survival, not happiness. And to the primitive part of your brain, survival means familiarity. This is the cruelest paradox of the human condition. We often prefer a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven. If you grew up in a chaotic home where love was mixed with shouting and instability, your nervous system learned to associate love with anxiety. Peace feels boring to you. Stability feels suspicious. So when you meet someone kind, stable, and available, you don't feel chemistry. You feel nothing. You pull away. You say there is no spark. But when you meet someone emotionally unavailable, someone chaotic, someone who makes you fight for their attention, suddenly your whole body lights up. You call it passion. You call it soulmate energy. But it is not passion. It is trauma recognition. Your unconscious mind is saying, "I know this hurt. I know how to survive this. This feels like home." You walk right back into the fire because the fire is the only warmth you have ever known. This is what Freud called the repetition compulsion. It is the uncontrollable urge to recreate the conditions of our original wounding. But why? Why would we do this to ourselves? It's not because we are masochists. It is because the child inside you is still trying to win the game that was lost years ago. If you felt ignored by a parent, you will subconsciously seek out partners who ignore you, hoping that this time, if you just try hard enough, if you are just perfect enough, you can force them to see you. You are trying to rewrite the ending of a movie that has already finished filming. You think that if you can change this new person, you will retroactively heal the wound of the past. But it never works. The new person is just a screen onto which you project your old ghosts. And until you realize this, you will continue to cast people in roles they never auditioned for and punish them when they play the part too well. This brings us to the concept of the shadow. Jung taught us that everything we deny, repress, or refuse to see in ourselves does not disappear. It sinks into the shadow. And the shadow has a peculiar way of manifesting. It projects itself onto the world. If you refuse to acknowledge your own weakness, you will constantly find yourself surrounded by people who oppress you. If you refuse to acknowledge your own capacity for aggression, you will constantly perceive yourself as a victim of others' aggression. The world acts as a mirror. If you see the same monster everywhere you go, it is because you are carrying the monster inside your pocket. It is a terrifying thought, isn't it? To realize that the enemy isn't out there, it's in here. But it is also the most liberating thought you will ever have. Because if the pattern is coming from within you, it means you have the power to stop it. You don't need the world to change. You don't need your ex to apologize. You don't need your parents to become different people. You only need to change the signal you are broadcasting. However, stopping the cycle requires a level of courage that few possess. It requires you to sit in the void, When you stop chasing the familiar pain, you are left with emptiness. You are left with the silence we spoke about before. And in that silence, all the repressed emotions you have been running from, the grief, the rage, the loneliness, will come rushing to the surface. Most people feel this initial wave of discomfort and immediately run back to the toxic relationship or the bad habit just to numb the feeling. They choose the pain they know over the uncertainty of healing. If you are finding yourself nodding along to this, if you feel a resonance in these words, it's because your psyche is ready to hear them. This isn't just a video, it's a synchronicity. It's a sign that you are tired of your own bullshit. If you want to support this channel and join a community of people who are doing this hard work, consider subscribing. It's a small action, but it tells your unconscious that you are ready for a new type of input, a new direction. Now let's go deeper into the mechanics of this loop. We need to talk about identity. Many of us are addicted to our pain because we don't know who we would be without it. Without your story of victimization, without your struggle, without your constant bad luck, who are you? For many, the pain provides a sense of self. It provides a narrative. I am the one who always gets left. I am the one who has to do everything alone. These are not just complaints. They are identity statements. And the ego defends its identity fiercely, even if that identity is miserable. To let go of the pain means to let go of the story you have been telling yourself for decades. It feels like a death. And in a way it is. It is the death of the false self. Jung spoke of the process of individuation, the journey of becoming your true whole self, but you cannot become your true self while you are constantly reacting to the wounds of the past. You are just a puppet dancing on the strings of your trauma. To cut those strings, you have to stop looking for closure outside of yourself. Closure is a myth. You will likely never get the apology you deserve. The person who hurt you may never understand what they did. And if you are waiting for them to validate your pain before you can move on, you are handing them the remote control to your life. You are saying, I will be happy only when you allow me to be. That is slavery. True freedom begins when you accept that the wound happened, that it was unfair, that it hurt, and that it is now your responsibility to heal it. Not your fault, but your responsibility. There is a massive difference. Fault looks backwards. Responsibility looks forward. The moment you take responsibility for your own reactions, the loop begins to weaken. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? Which part of me is resonating with this situation? Think about the last time you felt triggered. Maybe someone disrespected you. Your immediate reaction was likely anger or perhaps a desire to shrink away and hide. That reaction is the clue. It is the thread that leads back to the labyrinth. Why did that specific comment hurt? What belief about yourself did it activate? I am not enough. I am unlovable. I am unsafe. The external event is neutral. Your interpretation carries the charge. The pain you feel in the present is rarely just about the present. It is the accumulated interest on a debt you haven't paid to yourself for 20 years. Breaking the pattern requires you to do the opposite of what your instincts tell you to do. Jung called this holding the tension of the opposites. When you want to scream, you remain silent. When you want to run and chase someone who is pulling away, you stand still. When you want to numb yourself with distractions, you sit with the anxiety. You disrupt the neural pathway. You refuse to execute the old code. This is excruciatingly difficult. It feels like you are dying. Your brain will scream at you, do something, fix it, react, but you must remain the observer. You must watch the impulse rise, crest, and fall without acting on it. This is where the magic happens. Every time you refuse to repeat the pattern, you reclaim a piece of your energy. You recall the power you gave away to your trauma. You start to build a new neural pathway, one based on conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion. You begin to see people clearly, perhaps for the first time. You see them not as saviors or villains in your personal drama, but as flawed human beings struggling with their own shadows. The glamour fades. The desperate need for their approval evaporates. You start to realize that you are the container of your own life, not the contents that get tossed around. But be warned, when you start changing, the people around you will not applaud. In fact, they will likely try to pull you back into the old script. This is not necessarily because they are evil, but because your change threatens their stability. Systems seek homeostasis. If you have always been the fixer in your family, and suddenly you stop fixing the whole family, dynamic destabilizes. They will accuse you of being cold. They will say you've changed. They will try to push your old buttons to get the old reaction. This is the test. This is the initiation. Here is part 2 of the script. It continues seamlessly from where part 1 left off. Script: why you keep repeating the same pain. Carl Jung, part 2. When you refuse to pick up the cue cards and read the lines you have always read, you force the people around you to improvise. And people hate improvising. They want the predictable version of you because it makes them feel safe, even if that safety is built on dysfunction. So when you stand firm, when you say no where you used to say yes, when you offer silence instead of a defense, expect a backlash. This is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is the ultimate confirmation that you are finally doing something right. You are breaking the contract. You are exiting the shared hallucination. This phase, the space between the death of the old pattern and the birth of the new self, is what Jungians might call the nigredo, the blackening. It is the alchemical stage of decomposition. It feels like depression, but it is not depression. It is fermentation. It is the rotting away of the false ego. During this time you will feel an intense urge to go back. Your mind will rationalize returning to the toxic ex, the soul-sucking job, or the bad habit. It will whisper, at least there I knew the rules. Here in this void I am lost. But you must understand that this void is fertile ground. It is the womb of your future self. If you run from the emptiness, you run from your transformation. You have to learn to sit in that dark room without turning on the lights of distraction. You have to let the silence do its surgery on you. And this brings us back to the most potent tool in your arsenal, one that we touched upon earlier, the power of unavailability. In a world that demands your constant attention, reaction, and emotional currency, being unavailable is a revolutionary act. I am not talking about the manipulative silent treatment used to punish others. I am talking about the sovereign silence of a king or queen who does not need to shout to be heard. Think about the people who have held the most power over you. Were they the ones who screamed and begged, or were they the ones who could withdraw their energy and remain completely unaffected by your storms? The person who needs nothing is the person who controls everything. When you stop reacting to the provocations of others, you cut the fuel line to their machinery. You become a mirror. When they scream and you remain silent, they are forced to hear the echo of their own voice. When they try to guilt-trip you and you simply look at them with compassion but without yielding, they are forced to sit with their own manipulation. This is how you break the loop with others. You refuse to play catch. If someone throws you a ball of fire, an insult, a drama, a crisis, you simply let it drop to the floor. You don't catch it. You don't throw it back. You observe it. You look at it and say, that belongs to you, not me. This level of detachment requires you to accept a painful truth. You cannot save everyone, and you certainly cannot save people from the consequences of their own choices. Many of us repeat loops because we have a savior complex. We think if we love hard enough, we can fix the broken people we attract. But Jung warned us, you cannot change anyone unless they want to change. Your love is not a rehabilitation center. By constantly trying to fix others, you are avoiding the one person who actually needs your attention, yourself. If you are finding value in this deep dive, take a second to share this video with just one person, someone you know who is stuck in a cycle they can't seem to break. Sometimes a single insight is the spark that burns down the whole prison. Now let's talk about the final and perhaps most difficult aspect of breaking the cycle: forgiveness. But not the weak Hallmark card version of forgiveness. I am talking about a radical, surgical forgiveness. You must forgive yourself for the time you wasted. You must forgive yourself for the years you spent sleeping. You must forgive yourself for the people you let treat you poorly. We often hold on to our pain because we feel we need to punish ourselves. We think, I was so stupid to trust them, or I wasted my prime years. This self-resentment acts like a glue that binds you to the past. You cannot move forward while you are dragging the corpse of your past mistakes. You have to cut the rope. You have to look at your younger self, the one who made those bad choices, with radical compassion. That version of you was trying to survive. That version of you was operating with the limited tools and trauma-tinted glasses they had at the time. Thank them for getting you here, and then gently relieve them of duty. When you finally break the loop, something miraculous happens. The world changes. It truly does. But not because the world has changed, because you have. You start to vibrate at a different frequency. The toxic people who used to flock to you like moths to a flame suddenly lose interest. You are no longer a match for their demons. You become boring to them because you offer no drama. And in their place, new people begin to appear. People who are whole, people who respect boundaries, people who want to meet you, not use you. This is the promise of individuation. It is not just about psychological relief, it is about destiny. When you clear the debris of the repetition compulsion, you uncover the path that was actually meant for you. You stop living a life of reaction and start living a life of creation. But remember, this is not a one-time fix. It is a daily practice. The loop will try to reassert itself. You will have bad days. You will slip. You will text the ex. You will yell at your kids. You will doubt yourself. That is part of the human experience. The goal is not perfection. The goal is consciousness. The goal is to catch yourself quicker each time. Ah, there it is. There is the pattern. I see you. And today I choose differently. You are standing at a crossroads right now. One path is well-worn, comfortable, and predictable. It leads back to the same heartache, the same frustration, the same small life. The other path is overgrown, dark, and uncertain. It requires a machete and a lot of courage. It leads to the unknown, but it is the only path that leads to you. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who your parents wanted you to be, not who your trauma shaped you to be, but who you are underneath all of that. The silence is waiting for you. The power is waiting for you. The loop is broken the moment you decide it is." So I leave you with this question, and I want you to really let it sink into the marrow of your bones. If you stopped repeating your past, who would you be tomorrow? Don't just listen to this and scroll away. Make a choice. Declare it. Write in the comments, "I am breaking the loop." Let that be your first act of conscious definition. And if you are ready to continue this work, to go further into the shadow and bring back the gold, click on the video that is on your screen right now. The journey has just begun.
You are beginning to wonder why you keep waking up at 3 a.m. You're starting to suspect, as Carl Jung did, that it's not random, that it's a message. The house is quiet. So quiet, you can hear the hum of the refrigerator, the settling of the foundation, the sound of your own blood pulsing in your ears. The digital clock on the nightstand glows. 3:03 a.m. It is the hour of the wolf, the hour when the veil is thinnest. The hour when the defenses you spent all day building have crumbled in your sleep, leaving you utterly exposed. This is not the you who answers emails. This is not the you who smiles at the barista, who chairs the meeting, who reassures a friend, who pays the bills on time. That you is a careful construction, a masterpiece of engineering built piece by piece since childhood. It is the mask that allows you to function. It is your persona, and it is by all accounts successful. It gets you through the day. It earns you respect. It keeps the chaos at bay. But at 3:03 a.m., that mask is lying on the floor next to your discarded clothes. And you are awake. You are lying in the dark, and a feeling is rising. It isn't a thought. Not yet. It's a pressure. A deep, cold dread that starts in the stomach and radiates outward. It's the amorphous anxiety of everything left undone, everything unsaid, everything unlived. The daylight self, the ego, scrambles for a reason. It was the coffee. It's that deadline. It's money. It's that argument I had. And the soul, the part of you that has waited patiently for this silence, whispers back, no, it's deeper. Jung understood this moment. He knew that the psyche is a self-regulating system. It wants to be whole. And when we live too long on the surface, too long in the sunlit, manicured garden of our conscious life, the parts we have exiled, they begin to knock from the basement. At 3 a.m., the knocking is loudest. The unconscious is a vast ocean, and the conscious mind is a tiny, fragile boat bobbing on the surface. All day you sail, you navigate, you control. But in the deep night, you feel the true scale of the water beneath you. You feel the currents. You feel the things that live in the dark. This is the first part of the message. It is a simple system alert imbalance detected. The life you are performing has drifted too far from the life that is waiting to be lived. You feel it, don't you? The exhaustion, not just of body but of spirit. The exhaustion of upholding the persona. The psychic energy it takes to be on all the time. To pretend you are stronger, kinder, more efficient, or less angry than you truly are. That energy has to come from somewhere. It is borrowed, stolen from the reserves of your authentic self. And at 3 a.m., the debt comes due. The collector arrives. The dread you feel is the sound of your own unlived life weeping. Look at the person lying there. They who are you. They seem to have it all together. They are a good person. Responsible, capable. They've done everything right. And yet here they are in the sacred dark, feeling like a fraud. This is the first great gift of the 3 a.m. message. It is the moment of agonizing, clarifying honesty. The persona has failed. The armor has cracked. And through that crack, a sliver of real light or real darkness is filtering in. The message is not an attack. It is an invitation. It is a summons from the deepest, wisest part of you, what Jung called the self, the totality of who you are. The self is ringing the bell, waking the gatekeeper, because it needs to talk to you. And it can only be heard when the world is shut out, when the ego is drowsy and weak, when all the noise of the day has finally stopped. The message is, be still and listen. What is it that you have been refusing to hear? What truth have you been meticulously avoiding between your morning coffee and your evening wine? What part of you did you disown today? The anger you swallowed when someone crossed a boundary, the sadness you managed when you saw something beautiful or tragic, the creative impulse you dismissed as frivolous, the profound childish joy you labeled unproductive. These are not just feelings, they are beings. They are fragments of your own soul, and you have locked them in the cellar of your unconscious. But they don't die there. They fester. They curdle. They become what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is all the parts of yourself you have deemed unacceptable. The gold and the garbage all mixed together. The primitive, the childish, the weak, the rageful. And also the powerful, the sensual, the wildly creative, the ruthlessly honest. At 3 a.m., you are not being haunted by a ghost. You are being haunted by you. By the magnificent, terrifying, and complete version of you that your daytime life refuses to acknowledge. This is not insomnia. This is a homecoming, a terrifying one. The path to integration, to becoming whole, does not begin in the light. It does not begin with affirmations or 5-step plans. It begins here, in the dark, in the silent terror of 3:03 a.m. It begins when you stop asking, how do I get back to sleep? And you finally bravely ask, what are you trying to tell me? The answer at first is silence. A silence so profound it has a weight. It presses down on you. It is the silence of the deep ocean, the stillness of a cathedral before the first prayer. And in this silence, the feeling you are trying to escape intensifies. The dread finds a shape. It is no longer a vague cloud. It is a presence, a person. It is the you that you betrayed. It is the small child who was told to be quiet and who you to this day continue to silence. It is the passionate teenager whose heart you broke by choosing the sensible path. It is the artist, the poet, the wild creature you starved into submission because it didn't fit the persona. It is your shadow, and it is standing at the foot of your bed watching you, not with malice, but with a bottomless, heartbreaking sadness. It is the keeper of your vitality. It holds all the energy you've been complaining you don't have, the passion, the creativity, the raw, unfiltered life you've traded for security and acceptance. You've spent your days running from it. You fill your life with noise, with work, with a scrolling feed, with endless tasks, all to avoid this one simple, terrifying meeting. You've been running so fast, the only way yourself could get your attention was to trip you, to wake you stark and defenseless at the hour when the veil is thinnest. The message is, stop running. And as you lie there, truly looking at this feeling for the first time, you begin to see its threads. You see how it's connected to your waking life. That flash of irrational anger you felt at a colleague, that was your shadow recognizing its own disowned power in them. That strange obsessive envy you have for a friend's freedom, that is your own exiled freedom screaming to be acknowledged. That person you just cannot stand, and that other person you idealize. They are maps. They are living, breathing projections of the parts of you that are knocking from the basement. Jung was clear. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Your entire world is a screen, and at 3 a.m., the projector has been turned around. You are finally seeing the film, not just the picture on the wall. The message is, reclaim yourself. The world is not happening to you, it is happening from you. The anxiety you feel is the psychic tension of your own disowned parts fighting to be integrated. They have been projected onto the world, and now they are being pulled back. This is why it hurts. It is the pain of spiritual retrieval. It is the soul trying to become whole, pulling its fragments back from the bodies of others. And there's another presence here in the dark, a different energy. It is the source of that deep, aching loneliness that no relationship, no success, no amount of validation seems to touch. It is the feeling of being a traveler far from home. You've looked for this home in the arms of others. You've tried to build it with bricks and mortar, but it remains elusive. This, Jung would say, is the whisper of your anima or your animus. The inner other, the soul image. It is the feminine part of a man's psyche, his connection to his own inner world, to feeling, to creativity, to life itself. For decades he may have projected her, seeking her in partner after partner, demanding that she be the one to carry his soul, his feeling, his connection. And at 3 a.m, he wakes, and the bed feels empty, even if someone is lying next to him, because she is not beside him. She is within him, and he has ignored her. The message is connect with me. It is the masculine part of a woman's psyche, her connection to her own sovereign word, to meaning, to focus, to the power of logos. She may have projected him seeking a man to save her, to give her life structure, to be the assertive one. Or she may be possessed by him, trapped in a cage of rigid, critical internal opinions that poison her life. At 3 a.m, she wakes feeling a profound sense of meaninglessness, a passive drift, because he is not her guide. He is her unconscious tyrant. The message is, find your own voice. This is the great sacred wound of the modern world. We are split. We are a house divided. We have been taught to live entirely in the head or entirely in the emotion, entirely in the external or entirely in the internal. The 3 a.m. message is a plea for union, not with another person, but with the other inside yourself. This is the inner marriage, the hieros gamos. This is the work. This is the journey. The 3 a.m. dread is not a symptom to be cured. It is not an inconvenience to be medicated. It is a summons. It is the call of the horn in the deep woods. The quest is not to find a way to sleep through the night. The quest is to find the part of you that is waking you up. The self, the total psyche, is forcing a confrontation. It is forcing you to stop, to turn, and to face the parts of you that you have left behind in the dark. It is demanding that you begin the terrifying, magnificent process of individuation, of becoming not just the you the world sees, but the you were born to be. The message is, become whole, and so you stay. You don't turn on the light. You don't reach for the blue glow of the phone, that digital anesthetic for the soul. You simply remain. You lie in the dark and you breathe. You let the feeling, the dread, the loneliness, the presence of your own exiled life be there. You are doing the one thing the modern world has trained you not to do. You are bearing the tension of the opposites. You are holding the light and the dark, the known and the unknown, the persona and the shadow. You are not solving the problem. You are becoming the vessel that can hold it. This is the secret. This is the great work. The message is not an answer. It is a process. It is alchemy. The 3 a.m. Darkness is the prima materia, the raw, worthless leaden base matter of your anxiety. And your conscious, loving attention is the philosophical fire. You are not trying to fix the dread. You are trying to metabolize it, to find the gold that is hidden within the lead. This is why your dreams have become so vivid, or why you wake with the ghostly emotional residue of a dream you can't quite remember. Dreams, Jung knew, are the unfiltered letters from the self. They are the blueprints of your inner world delivered nightly. That recurring dream of the house, where you find a new room, one you never knew existed, that is the psyche showing you, you, showing you the vast undiscovered parts of your own being. The 3 a.m. Summons is the moment you wake up in that new room. It's dark, it's dusty, you don't know what's in here. And the message is, it's time to explore. What if the terror you feel is simply the energy of that unexplored room? What if the anxiety is not a sickness, but the vitality of your own disowned shadow, knocking on the door, asking to be let in? The gold in the shadow is not a poetic idea. It is a psychological reality. That rage you have suppressed, it is not just rage. It is your power. It is your ability to say no. It is your boundaries. That grief you have managed, it is not just sadness. It is your capacity to love. It is your connection to all living things. That lazy, unproductive part of you, it is not just apathy. It is your access to being, to rest, to the wisdom that does not come from doing. Night after night as you lie there, you are no longer just an insomniac. You are a miner. You are holding the dark, raw ore of your own feeling, and you are patiently, bravely asking it, what is the gift you are hiding? What part of me have I come here to reclaim? Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the energy shifts. The dread doesn't vanish. It transforms. It becomes less like terror and more like awe. It is the awe of your own depth. The dread becomes a kind of humming, a vibration. It is the sound of your own soul recalibrating. The dread was the sound of the parts of you at war. The new silence, the peace that follows, is the sound of them finding union. This is the journey of individuation. It is not a path to perfection, it is the path to wholeness. It is the realization that you are not just the small, fragile ego in the boat. You are the boat, you are the storm, and you are the entire fathomless ocean all at once. You are the mask, and you are the true face beneath it. You are the light of your consciousness, and you are the sacred, creative, terrifying dark it comes from. The sun will rise in an hour or two. The persona will be waiting by the bed. You will put it on. You must. You have a life to live. You will make the coffee. You will answer the emails. You will smile at the barista. But something is irrevocably different. You are no longer an actor who believes he is the role. You are the awareness that is playing the role. The mask is no longer fused to your skin. You wear it, but it does not wear you. And, when the house is quiet again, when the clock glows 3:03 a.m. and you wake, you will not be afraid. You will not be a victim, haunted by the night. You will be a student arriving for your lesson, a mystic entering the sanctuary. You will close your eyes and you will listen, because you finally understand. It was never a random affliction. It was never a problem to be solved. It was a message. It was an invitation. It was your own magnificent self, reaching across the veil, knocking on the door of your small room, asking you to come home.